Let me begin by making sure that you can hear me and see me. Good. My name is Deborah, and tonight we're going to experience an hour and a half of time together. We will have sitting and walking meditation, and then I will be giving a talk about right livelihood. I'm not sure, I'm not a very experienced Zoomer, so I'm checking to see if we have some newcomers with us this evening. If you are a newcomer, we will be going through some phases with our sitting and walking time, and those will be announced by bells. Our first sit of about 20 minutes will be announced with the sound of 3 bells. And there are no elaborate and complicated instructions for meditation. You'll want to find a comfortable seating place. You'll want to make sure that your spine is upright, that you're relaxed, and that you're open to experiencing silence and the process of letting whatever sort of intrusive or distracting thoughts might come by, just letting them move along. I always think that it's useful to think of leaves floating down a river as I'm imagining how those thoughts pass through. So everyone find your comfortable seating position. And let's begin. We'll be moving now into our walking meditation. So take a moment if you need to move around a little bit and stretch or yawn. This walking meditation will also be announced by a series of bells, a different bell. The first bell will signal that we are going to stand beside our chair. The second bell will signal that we will bow, and when we do that, we form a lotus with our hands and bow to one another, simply to acknowledge and honor those who are here, and to also acknowledge the capacity that we all have to be enlightened. After that second sound of the bell, there will be a third sound of the bell, and that will announce our walking meditation, which entails walking at a slow pace. It may be helpful as you walk to say some words to remind you to be present. Those words might be yes, thank you, with each step. It may be I am here, I am home. But the idea is to practice being mindful, being aware that this is a time when we don't have to rush, we don't have to hurry. We can cultivate peace and calm. We'll prepare now for our second sit, our final sit, which again will be announced with 3 bells to begin. And when that session completes, I will announce the end with a final bell. Well, I hope you're feeling better after meditation and feeling better after such a tumultuous week last week. I I listened to a podcast called 10% Happier, and one of the speakers on there said, sometimes you just have to turn off your alarm system. And I found myself thinking about that a lot. I needed to turn off my alarm system. And sometimes that meant just turning off the television. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about one of the limbs of the Noble Eightfold Path. We've started working our way through those limbs. This is our second segment on that. There will be more to come on subsequent Mondays. So one of the first things that I thought about in regard to this was the whole idea of path, because it applies not only to right livelihood, which is what I'll be talking about, but it applies to all of the talks that will be coming up. I thought it was a good image, this idea of path, being a journey. We're not there, we're finding our way. I think of a path as something that you can skip along or dance along. Sometimes you might stumble along, but it's being present and not thinking so much about the destination. The idea that it's a work in progress and that it's the journey that really counts and not the destination. So the whole idea of path seemed to me to be an important reminder. But I'm really supposed to talk about right livelihood. So in its pure sense, this is what it means to practice right livelihood. It means not dealing in arms or in the slave trade. It means not dealing in the meat trade, not dealing in sale of alcohol, drugs, or poisons. And last, not making prophecies or telling fortunes. The goal of right livelihood is to have a vocation or a life that is beneficial to humans, animals, plants, and the earth, or at least minimally harmful. But as I thought about those ideas, I really felt like I had come up against a wall, because not many of those seem to be particularly relevant to our lives now. They seem to be archaic concepts. So I began to think, wow, what have I got myself into here? What am I going to talk about? Maybe I should come down with laryngitis. But I had the good sense to keep persisting, to try to find some things that I thought would be meaningful to me and to you as well. The first thing that I came across was a story in this book. I think many of you have this book. And there's a chapter on right livelihood. And the story that I liked here is a story about a man who owns cows, a farmer who owns cows, but who has to slaughter the cows as a way of making a living. So I'll kind of read this and maybe summarize some of it. The farmer wants to know if he can, in the light of the mindfulness trainings, protect life. He feels that he gives his cattle the best conditions for their well-being. He cares for the cows lovingly. He even operates his own slaughterhouse so that there is no unnecessary cruelty inflicted on the animals when he puts an end to their lives. He has inherited this farm from his father, and he has a family to support. So he's in a dilemma. He has good intentions, but he also has these responsibilities. It is right livelihood to look after his cows while they are alive. He has the wish to be kind to his cows, but he also wants the security of an income for himself and his family. So this is what I found seemed to relate to the idea of path. The book says, as his insight deepens, the way out of the situation he finds himself in will present itself to him. I thought that was a really important idea, that he didn't have to have any rules imposed on him. He didn't have to have the solution forced on him in any way, but that he was going to find his own way, just as I had been thinking about this idea of path. So what is useful in this story, because as far as I know, none of us have cows, but I liked the idea that there's a lack of judgment here. The story doesn't say that the farmer's a bad person if he has to slaughter his cows, but instead the farmer will have this gradual awakening or insight, and this idea of inner knowing. The idea that we may have conflicted feelings, but we're going to figure it out. He's on the path. The path may be rocky, it may be slippery, his boots may get muddy, but he's going to get there. And he'll get there by practicing mindfulness and allowing his own inner knowing to step forward. So then I thought, well, okay, where will I go now? I thought about the word livelihood and just exactly what does that mean? The dictionary says that livelihood is about how we support ourselves, which is pretty obvious to most of us. But most of us aren't showing up for jobs, or not going to an office, or we're not punching a time clock. I don't really think anybody does that anymore, but we used to punch time clocks. We don't have to go to a factory or do what I used to do, which is type car titles as my early in life career. We've kind of moved on past that. Many of us are retired. So I found that in the dictionary, there is a more obscure, less widely known definition of what livelihood is. Livelihood is the quality of being lively, the quality of being lively. So livelihood, if we look at it that way, is being filled with life and making our way in the world so that we are filled with life and goodness and good intentions. I think we really want to be that way. It's that path that is admirable and attainable. So livelihood is not just about a job. It's about how we show up for life. It's how we live every day. I like to think that I could expand that idea of right livelihood a little bit. It's how we interact with other people, and it's how we find peace and serenity in ourselves. Thanks to the Plum Village app, I journeyed on to find something that I thought was about right livelihood, but might be a little bit more recognizable in our own lives. And that was an interview that was printed in the Guardian magazine from 2013. And it was an interview with Thich Nhat Hanh. And Thich Nhat Hanh in 2013 was hired by Google. He was asked to come to Google and advise their employees on how to practice right livelihood, how to be more present, and in a sense, more at peace and productive at the same time. So believe it or not, and maybe you already know this, Google is interested in mindfulness. They actually have a mindfulness training program. And I think it has a very cheesy title. It's called Search Inside Yourself. They also have meditation rooms in their office, which seems very California. So what does Thich Nhat Hanh have to teach them? What are his thoughts? After all, technology is part of our lives every day. It's part of our everyday livelihood. Well, for one thing, Thich Nhat Hanh understands the destructive forces of technology, but recognizes too that it has a dual nature. It has the power to do wonderful things, and it has the power to do a lot of damage. It's helpful and harmful at the same time. He says we do not have to reject or throw away all these devices, but we can make good use of them. We don't have to throw our phones in the Ashley River or take our computers to the recycling, but we can make good use of them. We can use those to practice right livelihood. He has some suggestions. He says that what we need to do are make some apps that allow people to calm their anger. Now, this was an interview in 2013, so I suspect there are already apps that allow people to calm their anger. And Anne, I was thinking about you when you were talking last week about your confrontation with your neighbors and how an app like that might have been useful to you. He also recommended, and I thought this was a really clever idea. Here's my Timex watch that has the hours marked by numbers. He said we need a watch that marks the hours not by numbers, but by the word now. So imagine all the clocks in your house, all your watches, that instead of having numbers, just have the word now. He also talks about success. He says you have to consider your idea of happiness. You think it's possible only if you win, if you're at the top. But it is not necessarily like that. Because even if you are successful in making money, you still suffer. You compete because you're not happy. I'm going to read that again. You compete because you're not happy. And meditation can help you to suffer less. This is, again, some more of his words. Many of us think you can only be happy when you leave other people behind, when you are number one. But you do not need to be number one to be happy. Meditation can calm your suffering so that you can conduct your business in a way that will make others suffer less. And meditation, goes on to say, can keep your employees from becoming overwhelmed, discontent, and ineffective. Another thing that he promotes in this interview is aimlessness. I know that maybe we have more unscheduled time now because of COVID, but I wonder how much time you devote in your day to being aimless. I have a pretty strong taskmaster in my life who says that I need to be productive a lot. And it's really a conscious decision for me to cultivate aimlessness. I think of one time at Sangha during our talk, I said that I hate to-do lists because I put so many things on the to-do list that I end up being frustrated at the end of the day because I don't get everything accomplished. So I thought, I wonder what would happen if I reinvented my to-do list and had aimlessness penciled in there. 3 o'clock, an hour of aimlessness. A poet friend of mine and I have this little running joke about how in order to be creative, we need time every day just to stare at the house plants. And I think that's another version of being aimless and making aimlessness intentional. Thich Nhat Hanh says we need to stop running. We need to go back to ourselves, to our beloved ones, and to nature, because electronic devices help us run away from ourselves. We lose ourselves in the internet, in business, in projects, and we have no time to be with ourselves. We are running away from self, from family, and from nature. So last, he talks about the need to have time to reflect and be inspired. He says that it's not just for our own well-being, but that so we can carry that into the world, carry that well-being into the world. Whether you're making, these are my examples, whether you're making a computer that will revolutionize the way we live, or if you're just baking a cake for a friend's birthday, we're carrying that well-being into the world as part of our right livelihood. And finally, he does have one statement to make that I thought really connected well with what our president-elect had to say about us being all in this together. Thich Nhat Hanh says that, quote, right livelihood has ceased to be a purely personal matter. It's our collective karma. It's our collective karma. I think I have enough time to close with something that I really like, and it has to do with Rin Tin Tin. You all know that I'm pretty involved in my life with dogs, and I'm a sucker for books about dogs. Some of them are pretty lightweight, but this one about Rin Tin Tin was written by someone very well known, writer by the name of Susan Orlean. And Rin Tin Tin, I think you probably know, was this famous German Shepherd. He was the first animal celebrity, TV celebrity. And he made lots of money, he gained a lot of fame, but in the end, Rin Tin Tin had something to show us about right livelihood and how it can be very simple. You probably know too that dogs really live in the now. They only live in the now. So this is what Susan Orland wrote about Rin Tin Tin. The lesson we have yet to learn from dogs that could sustain us is that having no apprehension of the past or of the future is not limiting, but liberating. Rin Tin Tin did not need to be remembered in order to be happy. For him, it was always enough to have that instant when the sun was soft, when the ball was tossed and caught, when the beloved rubber doll was squeaked. Such a moment was complete in itself, pure and sufficient. Who knew that Rin Tin Tin was a practicing Buddhist? Good lesson. Well, that concludes what I wanted to talk about, but we're going to reserve time now for each one of you who wishes to speak to unmute, to bow in that you are announcing that you have something to say. And when you finish what you need to say, you'll bow once again to announce that you're finished. So please speak if you're so inclined.
This is Ron bowing in. Anybody hear me? Yes, thank you. Yeah, a couple things to say about enlivening. Well, your talk was enlivening. Thank you. And entertaining and enlivening. Thank you for that. And I see, instead of this past few days being tumultuous, I see them as being enlivening and exhilarating instead of tumultuous. And as far as the aimlessness is concerned, one of the best things I learned in A Course in Miracles is need do nothing. And that has helped me so many times that being is much more important than doing, coming from a workaholic father, being able to relax into need do nothing. Ron, bowing out.
This is Heather bowing in. Thank you, Deborah. That was lovely. And I was especially touched by the story of the farmer and being on the path and not having to have the answers all at once with something like Right Livelihood. I've always thought of it as kind of how do we devote our creative attention. We are very fortunate in this country where most of us have the opportunity to have some creative attention to give. You know, when we're just above the threshold of poverty, we can start to make some choices for our own survival. So that in and of itself is a privilege. But when we have the choice, do we select, you know, to be famous, or do we select to be, you know, something that devote ourselves to healing and bringing ease to ourselves and others, and that's sort of like gets to that volition part of our practice. What is our volition? I've seen for myself this Right Livelihood sort of unfold over the years. When I first encountered it, I was running a nonprofit and I was really struggling and really strident and pushing to have things change. And that right livelihood concept, that aimlessness, that letting go and being alive and mindful in the moment sort of transformed how I ran the organization and the kinds of projects I took and how I supported employees. And so I had a real personal shift during the first half of my nonprofit work and the second half of my nonprofit work. And then it really led me on a journey to releasing the nonprofit altogether, to returning to nature, and then to coming back and doing the book and Sangha life and all of that. So it's been a real journey for myself. And I think any job that we do, we can do it in a way that makes the world better. I remember one time I was in Chicago and I got in a taxi cab and I was totally in my head and late and had a lot of things going on. And the cab driver was a miracle worker. Because by the time I got out of the cab, 10 minutes later, I was transformed. We were laughing. We were, he was just the gentlest of souls. And he had newspaper clippings all over his cab about how special a ride was with him. And I remember Ty also talking about, if you're a filmmaker, what kinds of films do you make? Because it is such a powerful tool. What kind of art do you give the world? So that notion of right livelihood, it's like no matter what we're doing, there are those thresholds of careers that are harmful. But also there's that big open possibility of no matter what we're doing, no matter what we feel called to do, or no matter where we're standing in this moment, that we can do it in a way that brings wholesomeness and ease to ourselves and to others. So thank you, Deborah. This is a lovely talk at an important moment when we're all, I think, in transition about what it is that we're doing today and then in the days into the future, because this choice is always before us. So thank you for bringing this to us. Heather bowing out.
Anne bowing in. Look, thank you very much, Deb, and thank you for thinking of me while you were putting your talk together. One of the things that really speaks to me today is how we live our lives and how we interact with people. And I have been greatly relieved after the last 4 years and the months and weeks and days of our political situation, and was very happy when the election was called for Biden. And I'm doing a happy dance. And my daughter was here and we were all doing happy dances and just feeling really good. And then I walk out into my neighborhood and all know that I live in a very, very red neighborhood, and decided that I have to be, I mustn't gloat. I mustn't be, I don't want to bring wrath upon me, myself. And nor would at any moment would I ever want to do that. So I've just and it's gotten very quiet in my neighborhood. People are not happy. And I took a walk the other day. Here I am out in my neighborhood again. And I would just talk to one of my neighbors who was just delighted over the outcome of the election. And I was talking to her and had a big smile on my face, and so as I turned to walk away, because she was going to go in and twist, that was going to be her happy dance. And then as I walked away, I had a big smile on my face, and there was a woman across the road who looked at me and she said, "Well, you look really happy. Your daughter must still be here." And I said, "Yes, she is still here." And I said, "And my candidate won." And she just stopped and glared at me, and she said, "Oh, well, I'm not happy about that." And then she raised her arm and she said, "You'll rue the day that you voted for him." And I said, "Oh, no, I won't. I'm really happy." It just was my normal, what I would say. And just not wanting, no intent to upset her or anything. I was just being who I can be when I'm a happy camper. But subsequently, there have been a couple of other people who have been very angry with me. Some woman with whom I'm pretty good friends told me that if I was going to regret it because of the taxes that it was going to bring me. Didn't I know about how much taxes? And then I said, well, perhaps the taxes just won't all be going to the military. She said, no, they'll be going to social programs. And I went, isn't that nice? And without, like I say, being antagonistic or whatever, but I'm really having to be mindful. And so then I've been very mindful and actually I walk a lot and doing mindful walking, just to kind of bring myself, center myself to peace and serenity that I can share within myself and appropriately as I can do outwardly, because wow, what a world. And I'm so grateful for the opportunities that we have now. So I'm keeping my cool and I'm not being unkind and bowing out.
This is Dave bowing in. Heather and I were part of a Sangha in Madison, and one of the ladies who was actually the choir director at the Unitarian Church had a tattoo on her arm of a watch that said "now." There was no numbers. But, since I gave up my career in arms dealing and retired, I actually still think that we all have livelihoods. And I think my livelihood is to relieve suffering. And I bet all of you do have the same livelihood. I think you're nice people, you help people out, you're engaged. And I see that as a real livelihood. Part of that collective karma. And I think that's actually when you have a regular job, that's part of your bright livelihood, is that you're engaged with a collective karma, because so many